soft wind. Then a single deep breath sound. Then silence. Close your eyes for a second. Not literally, you're watching a video. But imagine. It's night. The air is so cold that your eyelashes freeze when you blink. Your fingers have stopped feeling anything. The sky is black. No stars. Just snow falling like someone threw a blanket over the world. And then, you see it. A low, dark shape. Smoke curling from a roof made of grass. A Viking home. You crawl through a doorway so small you have to bend your back. And inside, it's not warm like summer. But it's alive. A fire breathes in the center. People sit close. Fur covers the walls. The cold. It stayed outside. How did they do that? No furnace. No insulation from a factory. No emergency backup. This is not a fairy tale. This is engineering. Ancient, quiet, and almost forgotten. If you want to know the real secret, the one that still works today, hit like. Subscribe to Little Historical. And stay with me. Because the Vikings didn't beat winter with strength. They beat it with something better. You already know winter was the enemy. But here is what the old stories do not tell you. The Vikings did not build their homes on top of the ground like hopeful children. They dug into it. Slowly, carefully, almost secretly. They carved the floor down into the earth's own skin, sometimes a full meter deep, until the house crouched low like an animal hiding from a predator. And that single decision changed everything. Because the ground is not just dirt. It is a memory. It remembers the heat of summer long after the air has turned cruel. While the wind above screamed and the snow buried everything in sight, the soil just a few feet down stayed stubbornly, almost annoyingly, calm. It refused to panic. The Vikings noticed this. They always noticed. Think of it this way. A modern house stands above ground, proud and exposed, offering itself to the cold like an invitation. Every gust of wind finds its way underneath. Every drop in temperature attacks from all sides at once. But a Viking home, sunken into the earth, was different. It leaned against the planet itself. The ground became a blanket. A thick, heavy, silent blanket that never complained and never asked for thanks. The cold could rage all it wanted above. Down where the family slept, where the fire breathed, where children whispered in the dark, the temperature barely moved. There is something almost intimate about that arrangement. The house was not just on the earth. It was inside it. Wrapped by it. Held by it. You can almost feel the difference if you imagine lying against something warm that does not speak. That simply exists beneath you, patient and steady, absorbing every attack winter threw at the house. But here is the suspenseful part. Digging into the ground was not easy. It meant frozen mud. It meant wet boots and aching backs. It meant working when every instinct told you to stay by the fire. And yet they did it. Generation after generation. Because they knew something that feels almost forbidden to admit. The earth does not care about your comfort. But it will protect you if you let it. You just have to be willing to go low. To humble yourself. To stop fighting the cold and instead hide inside the one thing winter cannot touch. That was the first secret. And it is also the most intimate. Because after the floor was sunk, after the walls rose from the earth like a second skin, the house stopped being a building. It became a body. A living, breathing, warm body that remembered heat the way skin remembers a touch. And once you understand that, the next secret will make you look at a simple grass roof very, very differently. And that next secret is the roof. But not a roof as you know it. Imagine looking up inside a Viking longhouse and seeing not wood or stone, but grass. Hanging roots. Soil that still holds the memory of rain. A living ceiling that breathes, settles, and grows while you sleep below it. This was not decoration. This was desperation shaped into genius. The Vikings cut blocks of turf from the earth, thick squares of grass and roots and dark, heavy soil, and they stacked them onto their roofs like blankets that never stopped working. And here is where the intimacy deepens. Turf does not simply insulate. It clings. It seals every gap, every crack, every place where winter might slide its cold fingers through. As the grass grows, the roots tangle tighter. The roof becomes tighter. The house pulls itself closed like a body protecting its warmth. Think about what that means for the people inside. Above them, a layer of living green. Above that, snow that falls and stays, adding even more weight, even more silence. The roof does not reject winter. It uses it. Each snowfall becomes another blanket. Each storm makes the house warmer, not colder. There is something almost unsettling about that kind of efficiency. It feels less like architecture and more like a pact. The house asks the earth for protection, and the earth answers through grass and roots and slow, patient growth. And the Vikings? They lay directly beneath it, breathing air thick with smoke and the faint, damp smell of soil, listening to the wind howl above a ceiling that simply refuses to care. But here is the suspense that should make you pause. A turf roof is heavy, incredibly heavy. It sags. It presses down on the wooden beams with the weight of the entire outdoors. And the Vikings knew this. They did not build tall, proud roofs that reached for the sky. They built low, humble roofs that hugged the house like a lover who refuses to let go. Because a low roof keeps heat where it belongs. Down near the fire. Down near the bodies. Down where life actually happens. So the turf did not just block the cold. It trapped warmth. It absorbed the heat rising from the hearth and held it, releasing it slowly through the long, dark hours when the fire dimmed. The house was not just a shelter anymore. It was a storage room for stolen summer. And the most unsettling part. The grass kept growing. The roof stayed alive. Which means the Viking home was never truly finished. It was always becoming. Always settling. Always pulling itself tighter around the people inside. And that living warmth leads directly to the next secret, the one that burns at the very center of the longhouse. The fire. But not the fire you are imagining. No grand stone chimney. No elegant mantle. No clean, obedient flame that knows its place. The Viking hearth sat in the center of the longhouse like a wild heart that refused to be caged. And here is the first thing that should disturb you. There was no hole in the roof for the smoke to escape. Not at first. The smoke simply rose, drifted, and collected near the turf ceiling like a slow, grey fog that had nowhere else to go. By every modern instinct, that should have been unbearable. Suffocating. A mistake. But the Vikings did not see it as a mistake. They saw it as a partner. Let me explain what that smoke actually did. It climbed the wooden beams and began to cure them. Slowly, patiently, the soot sank into the timber, drying out moisture, sealing pores, making the wood harder and more resistant to rot. The house was being smoked from the inside, like meat over a slow fire. And the smoke did not stop there. It crept into every crack, every seam, every tiny gap where winter might have slipped through. The soot built up in those openings, blocking drafts, sealing the house tighter than any caulking ever could. The fire was not just heating the home. It was repairing it. Night after night. Without being asked. There is something almost seductive about that kind of quiet labor. The flame gives warmth, yes, but it also gives maintenance. It gives protection. It gives itself to the wood and the walls and the lungs of the people who breathe it in. And those lungs. That is where the tension lives. Because a smoky room is not comfortable. Your eyes water. Your throat tightens. You learn very quickly where to sit and where not to sit. But here is the unsettling truth the Vikings understood. The smoke also kept insects away. Fleas, lice, moths, anything that would have turned a fur blanket into a nightmare simply could not survive in that haze. The same air that made you cough also made you safer. Cleaner. Less eaten. There is an intimacy in that trade. You accept discomfort. You accept the sting in your eyes. And in return, the fire gives you warmth, preservation, and a home that slowly cures itself like a living thing. The hearth was not a feature. It was the house's metabolism. Its breath. Its quiet. Constant hunger. And when the fire dimmed at night, banked under ash like a secret waiting to be rediscovered, the smoke did not stop. It lingered. It held the warmth in place. It made sure the house remembered heat even while the family slept. That is why the Viking home never froze. Not because the fire was huge, but because the fire was faithful. And the smoke was never wasted. Now, with that faithful flame still glowing in the center, let me tell you about the warmest thing inside that longhouse. Something that breathed, moved, and pressed close in the darkness. Something that breathed, moved, and pressed close in the darkness. Not the fire. Not the turf. Something warmer. Something alive. The Vikings knew a secret that modern architecture has almost entirely forgotten. Humans are heaters. Animals are even better. And in a longhouse buried under snow, with a low ceiling holding smoke and a turf roof pressing down like a weighted blanket, every single body in that room was a furnace. But here is where the intimacy becomes almost uncomfortable to discuss. They did not sleep apart. They did not value privacy the way you do. Families slept side by side on raised wooden platforms built against the warmest walls. Children curled against parents. Elders placed in the center where heat lingered longest. Servants, visitors, sometimes even the livestock at the far end of the hall, all breathing the same smoky air, all sharing the same warmth. Think about what that really means. You are lying on fur. The person next to you is close enough that you feel their breath. Their shoulder presses against yours. When the fire sinks low in the early morning hours, before anyone wakes to feed it, the only thing keeping your fingers from freezing is the body beside you. There is no embarrassment in this. No awkwardness. Winter does not respect your need for space. And the Vikings understood that shame was a luxury that could kill you. So they pressed closer. They pulled furs over their heads, trapping the heat from their own exhalations. They slept in a tangle of arms and legs and wool and animal hides, creating a pocket of warmth so stubborn that the cold outside simply could not reach it. And then there were the animals. On the worst nights, when the wind screamed loud enough to shake the roof beams, the livestock came inside. Cows, sheep, goats, sometimes even horses, housed at the end of the longhouse behind low partitions. Their bodies gave off enormous heat. Their breath fogged the air with moisture that kept the wooden walls from drying out and cracking. Did it smell? Of course it did. But smell does not kill you. Freezing does. There is something almost unsettling in that calculation. The Vikings did not choose comfort. They chose survival. And survival meant letting a cow breathe warm air next to your sleeping child. It meant waking up to the sound of hooves and hay and the low, rumbling heat of a dozen animals dreaming in the dark. That is the final secret of the longhouse. Warmth multiplies when it is shared. And the Vikings shared everything. Their fire. Their roof. Their breath. Their bodies. That is why they never froze. And that is why, even now, the memory of that crowded, living warmth still feels like something we have lost.